we're going to combine parts of 2.2 and 2.3, and we're going to be looking at isolating for variables. Your essential question for today is, how are solving and isolating for a variable similar? Let's go ahead and look at problem number 1. Now what I've done here is I've given you a formula with several variables, and what I've asked you to do is isolate for the w. In other words, what I want you to do is go into this formula and I want you to get the w by itself. So we need to get rid of the L, we need to get rid of the 2. We need to move them over with the P. Now the cool thing about this is it's exactly the same as solving for equations. You use your inverse property when you're moving across the equal sign. So we're going to move the 2 across the equal sign, we're going to move the L across the equal sign, and we're going to use our inverse properties to do so. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is get my 2 out of there. Now I've got a couple options. I could distribute the 2 into the parentheses, but what that's going to do is it's going to add a 2 to my w, and I don't want to make my w any harder to isolate for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just divide by a 2, and that's going to cancel that 2 straight out. Remember, the opposite of times is division, so the inverse property in this case is division. That leaves me with P, or perimeter divided by 2, equals length plus width. Now I got rid of my parentheses that way. The next thing I need to get rid of is this L. Since this is a positive L and I'm moving over the equal sign, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the inverse property and subtract that L. So what I've got is P divided by 2 minus L equals W. Now remember, the P divided by 2 and the L can't go together. They're not like terms, so we've got to keep those separate. And we've isolated for our W and we're finished. I want to look at a little different type of problem. I want to look at a problem with a fraction. So what I've done is I've given you the volume formula and I've asked you to isolate for the h. So what I want you to do is get this h by itself, which means we need to move the b and we need to move the 1/3. We're going to move them over the equal sign using our inverse properties. Now, once again, very similar to solving equations, we've got to get rid of our fraction and our parentheses first. I don't have any parentheses, but I do have a fraction. And the way that we get rid of fractions is we multiply by the denominator. In this case, the denominator is a 3. So I'm going to take this entire term. Remember, since these are multiplied, this is an entire term by itself. I'm going to take this entire term times a 3. When I take the entire term times a 3, what it does is it cancels the 3 on the bottom. But of course, if I do it on the right side, I've got to multiply on the left side, leaving me 3 times volume equals BH. Now that my fraction's gone, I need to isolate for the h by getting rid of this b. This is b times h, and since it's b times h, the opposite of times, or the inverse property of multiplication, is division. So I'm going to divide that b over, and what it's going to do is it's going to leave me 3v divided by b equals h, and we've isolated for the variable that we need. Now what I want to look at is I want to look at a word problem involving some isolating and some solving. So Chapter 2 is made up of several different types of word problems, and so we're going to be working with them as we go. So this is the first type of word problem you're going to need to be able to solve. We're talking about rectangles here, so let's go ahead and read it. The length of a rectangle is 1 more than twice the width. The perimeter of the rectangle is 110 centimeters. Find the length and width of the rectangle. So when you're given a problem like this, the minute you see a shape, sometimes it's easier for us to draw a picture. So what I've done down here is I've drawn a rectangle, you'll see. Now from here, I'm just going to go sentence by sentence. The length of the rectangle is 1 centimeter more than twice the width. So what this is telling me is the length of the rectangle, so this is my length, and this is my length. The length of the rectangle is, now remember the word is in math translates to an equal sign. The length of the rectangle is 1 more than twice the width. 1 more than is a plus, twice the width, or 2 times the width. Twice the width, or 2 times the width. So let me read it again. The length of the rectangle is 1 more than twice the width, which translates directly to this top sentence. The length of the rectangle is 1 more than twice the width. Now, since, remember, top and bottom are the same, that translates to both of these sides being 1 plus 2w. Now let's look at our second sentence. The second sentence says the perimeter of the rectangle is 110 centimeters. Well, if it's talking about perimeter, we need to go ahead and get our perimeter formula out. What is the formula for perimeter? Well, we just worked with it on problem number 1. The formula for perimeter is 2 times L plus W. The other way that you can do perimeter is to add all the sides. Either way would work. So if perimeter equals 2 times L plus W, I know in this case the perimeter happens to be 110 centimeters. So if the perimeter is 110 centimeters, I'm going to replace my P with 110 because I now know that the perimeter is actually 110 centimeters. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the rest of this equation. I can't solve this equation because I have 2 separate variables. You can't solve a linear equation until you get it into one variable. So it looks like I'm going to need to replace one of these with something. Well, I happen to know what L equals. I happen to know that L equals 1 plus 2W. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my problem and I'm going to take 1 plus 2W and I'm going to plug it in for L. So I'm going to replace that L with 1 plus 2W. So instead of 2 times L, it's going to be 2 times 1 plus 2W plus W. So I replaced my L with 1 plus 2W. I kept my W as W, giving me 1 plus 2W plus W. Now that I've got it in one variable, I can actually solve this. So 110 equals 2 times, I'm going to put my like terms together. I am not going over the equal sign, so I am not going to use my inverse property. I'm going to get rid of my parentheses by multiplying that 2 in. I'm going to continue to solve. And 108 divided by 6 happens to be 18. Of course, we're going to label it 18 centimeters. Now, this is all fine and dandy, but I didn't ask you to solve for the width. I asked you to solve for the length and the width. If you look at your last sentence, find the length and the width. I asked you to find length and width. Well, if I know that my width is 18 centimeters, at this point, I can take that 18 and come in here and plug it in for width. If I know that W is 18, instead of 1 plus 2W, I can do 1 plus 2 times 18. 1 plus 2 times 18 happens to be 37 centimeters. Once again, of course, we're going to label it. So my length is 37, my width is 18.